Welcome to Raw Radio.
Man, it's a struggle with you today.
I'm fine. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm on my own timetable, that's all. I'm not going to press a button when you tell me to. I'll press it when I'm ready.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. I'm only talking like that because we got this desk separating us. And I'm not on the mat tonight, and I know you'll forget by tomorrow. So, yeah.
Wow. I feel like I should leave.
Yeah. Don't stick around. You always got something important. So.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. Let me amuse you.
Yeah. What are we talking about today? Let's get to the topic at hand instead of wasting all this time.
First of all, I do want to say that this was a very, very stimulating conversation with Marcus.
Yeah, absolutely. Great guy,
I was
super
talking.
mature. The way you're holding your hand and everything, it was like you left an opening, and I thought I was supposed to fill it.
No. This was meaning that I'm talking. Fine.
Okay,
Whatever.
go ahead.
Like I said, I should leave.
You should.
Go.
You should. You want me to do this by myself? Everybody else will leave too then. So don't stick around. But did you want to finish your thought, or did I
I
derail
already lost
you?
it. It's gone already.
But so if you don't know Marcus's story, very, very new black belt under JT Torres. He just got it a couple of weeks ago. And like we talked about, like, what's the future going to hold? And through the conversation, it seemed like there was there was certain chapters of his life. Things took him different places at different times. You know, he wasn't somebody who like came up the ranks at the same spot. He didn't live in the same city his whole life. He went away to school. He quit for a couple of years completely, other than, kind of like being a fan or following what was going on with people he used to train with, but he wasn't training at all. And we were talking about like just the different chapters that his life took.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting. First of all, before we even get there, majority of people we have on the show have been black belts for a very long time, and if not, they have well-established mat presence. Let's just put it that way. They've been around the block for a very long time. So I was very excited to book Marcus and have this conversation with him, because as you mentioned, he literally got his black belt just now, like literally, what was it, 16 days ago, whatever he said. So it doesn't get closer to the pivot point of your jiu-jitsu journey as that, right? And hearing his perspective on these different chapters in life, it was very interesting. It was very stimulating. It was very refreshing to hear, his perspective on life, on his jiu-jitsu journey, especially as he said, just closed one chapter and opened a brand new one, and he has a lot of plans. He has a lot of goals that he wants to achieve, and some of them are not easy, but at the same time, he's very, very realistic about them. So let's talk about chapters. How do you look at life? Is it one big chapter, one big bucket, or is it how you look at this?
It's funny. I like reference, like if I'm referencing periods of my life, it's there's always like it was where I was working, maybe who I was dating, pre and post kids, so there's all those. I guess there's a pre and post jiu-jitsu too. So yeah, there's been definitely a lot of, and now I'm older, so there's obviously more chapters, because I haven't stayed in the same work. I haven't stayed in the same career my whole life. I haven't, the only thing I really did is stay in the same vicinity, in or around now Chicago, right? I didn't go away to school. I didn't go away for work. So I've always kind of been in the same locale, but all those other things have changed, and I see how I changed through them, because of them, despite them, things like that. So yeah, I always look at those different periods of my life, and I think probably most people do. kind of dissect it that way.
Why do we create chapters? Because truthfully, let's just hypothetically say a new chapter starts today. There really nothing changed between yesterday and today.
Well, I don't think that's true, really. Like I said, relationships, work. I've been fortunate enough where I haven't had a ton of tragedy in my life. There's been some things, but like, you know, there's been people I know have been in major car accidents that changed everything for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I think that's why we do it.
But why do we do it? Not how or not what is happening within the chapter, but why do we feel the sense that we need to close that book or close that door and we're looking at a brand new beginning?
I don't know if how many people actually do it that way. You know, I was more like cataloging it in my explanation. Okay. So I'm cataloging things. I'm not necessarily saying that's in the past. I mean, there are certain things like I'll never go back to certain career. Mm-hmm. I just never will. That's in the past.
Like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So I have that aspect of what you're talking about. Sure. But I maybe because things just didn't meet your expectations, right? So you move on from it and you decide I'm not dealing with that anymore.
But what about success?
I
graduated from school.
Then you're done. You move on, right? You move on. You got there are those guys that graduate and stick around school and they're pretty creepy, but they're out there.
Of course, you know gotta go that direction.
There are the dudes that graduate and still hang out at the college bar and all that stuff. But then what are you doing if you're not closing those, or turning the page, if we're going to stay with the book analogy, and moving on to a new chapter? I think you probably kind of stay stagnant. We've talked about this before where I have friends that are exactly the exact same people they were in high school. Mm-hmm. And they're still the same, and their thought process is still the same, and they listen to exactly the same music, and everything else that's different is garbage. And it's weird for me anyway, as a person, for me to, I look at all if I stayed exactly the same way I was, I look at all the missed opportunities I would have had, up until now. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? All those wonderful chapters in my life that never would have happened. They just never would have. I would not have, had I not decided I need to make this change, I wouldn't be in the current relationship I'm in. I wouldn't have the children. And it was decisive. Like, I need to make this change. And then those other things happened in that new chapter, right? Same thing with jiu-jitsu. I was sitting at home. All I was doing was on Facebook. I was getting into heated arguments, right? One of those, it was happening to me where I was one of those people. And I was like, this has got to change. So I had to make the change. And I reached out to two people who trained under different people in the city, said, I need recommendations out where I'm living now. And they got back to me. So I had to make that change. And if I hadn't, well, then all these other wonderful things wouldn't have happened. Mm. So, I think you have to move on and be receptive of other things and take them into your life and see what opportunities arise from it.
So pivot that into jiu-jitsu. Bring it onto the mat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Bring it onto the mat, right? Uh-huh. So
if I didn't do any of those, if I didn't apply that same thing to the mat, see, I'm applying my life to the mat, not the other way around. Maybe that's why I'm happy at home, but my jiu-jitsu sucks. But I mean, well, so what do you got to do if you keep doing the exact same thing? Let's say you had some mild success on the mats as a white belt, and you stuck with those things that made you successful as a white belt with all the other white belts in the room and maybe a couple blue belts, and that's all you did. You're going to get passed up. People are going to leapfrog over you. Your game's not going to develop. You're not going to get any better. You're going to end up getting discouraged, right? And then you're going to end up probably getting the blue belt blues, and then you're probably going to quit. So that's how I bring it on the mat. So you have to be open and receptive and close some things like, oh, those things worked for me as a white belt, but they're no longer working for me now because everything around me has changed. So now I have to change too. I have to adapt and do something different. Is it? I don't know. We bring it onto the mats and it starts to get silly sounding, but I think am I wrong? Do you see it differently? Are you doing the same things you did 15 years ago, 10 years ago?
No.
5 years ago?
I don't think anybody is.
Right. Well, anybody who's gotten better isn't, right?
No, I don't know.
You can't get better if you're doing the exact same thing.
But that wasn't the question. The question was, did anything change? And well, that's what I'm saying, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be better. It could be evolving in different directions. So
I always equate evolving with being better.
Well, I understand that, and I think that's the desired direction, but it doesn't always happen that way, right? We do fail. There are obstacles, and a chapter doesn't have to be necessarily associated with a success.
Not at all. Not at all.
Could be success. Could be associated with an obstacle. It could be associated with an event.
Right.
It could be. Honestly, it could be.
But then, what's the next chapter? It's what you learned from that. I think, and you know what I'm saying. It's not that you just switched jobs. It's now you're at this new job, taking with it all the experiences that you had at the previous one, and learning from that. If you're doing it right, in my eyes.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at this slightly differently. I guess I look at this as a chapter is a point of time where certain events took place, and this helps me to categorize these events. So I could have one chapter long for 20 years.
Yeah.
And then I could have 3 chapters for only 1 week, or I have multiple chapters for just 1 hour. Right. And they could, and I guess how saturated it is really up to you, but there could be an event in the life where has significant impact, but it was very short.
Well,
and that's a chapter too.
Yes, it is. But I think that the impact, I don't see the event as the chapter. I see the impact.
And I think this is where the definition is different for both of us. Okay. We categorize this different way. So even like when we relate this to jiu-jitsu, some will look at it as a chapter, as a jiu-jitsu. Their journey is one chapter. Other person will look at it as, well, I got my 3 stripes on my white belt, and that's a chapter for me.
Right.
Another person will look at it, I got my blue belt, and that's a chapter for me. Another person will look at it, listen, last 4 weeks, we've been working on, I don't know, a smash passing, and that's a chapter for me because it was so freaking miserable. I couldn't freaking stand it, or I couldn't,
right,
or
that,
right. So I think the main point here is that we find ourselves in these points of time, which events evolve around us and circumstances unfold. And I guess I'm trying to think, why the hell do we do chapters? That's what I'm trying to understand. And
you can label it anything you want.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's just a label, right?
It's easy because it's an easy analogy
for the book, right? And it's something that we closing one thing, we opening another thing, but it could be, it
could be doors and windows. It could be lots of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think this one's it's easy to work with.
Yeah.
I think that's
should we take the same approach in each of the chapters? Should we take any actions? Here's a good thought. Do you find chapters as a approach to the future, or is it a retroactive as to what already has occurred?
I think it's always towards the future and what you've learned from the past. Maybe I'm approaching this differently, but can you go back and amend things and change things? Yeah, probably. But I think that anything that's happening now, you can apply in the future.
Oh, we always,
if you're aware, you've got to be self-aware. You've got to have an understanding of these things how is this impacting me? How is this changing me? How is this affecting my home life? How is it affecting my work life? All of that. And when you start analyzing it and breaking it down, then definitely, I think anyway, it's more towards the future.
Well, and I think this is where what you were talking about is learning or having takeaways, having lessons learned, or having some tangible information drawn from, or conclusion drawn from the experiences from the past, and now learning from it, making necessary adjustments for us to become a better person and continue evolving for the future, right?
Yeah, and you could take that same statement and instead of saying a better person, say make my jiu-jitsu better. You can do that.
Right.
That's all applies, right?
Yeah.
I think it's exactly, it's just a couple of different words.
Yeah.
But it's basically the same thing.
Identifying it might be the hardest part here.
Yeah, I think so. We've talked about things in the past about not only identifying it, but putting like your ego aside and saying, okay, what's the truth in this? What's the reality of it? Rather than like building up walls or hiding behind something or having a fragile ego. You have to really look at it from a perspective of, how to like that. You have to look down on it. You have to be above it, look down on it, analyze it, be truthful about it, honest with yourself about it.
But that's the hard part.
Yeah, it's hard. Sure.
Yeah, looking back on the events that took place, especially if they are difficult events. That's...
Who did we talk to not that long ago? Where like you're laying in bed at 3 a.m, you can't sleep for whatever reason, and you're like, "Ah, shit, boy, did I really fudge that one up?" Or what a mistake that was, or boy, did I look stupid that day? And and that's why are you thinking about something that happened to you when you were 17? At 3 a.m. in the morning, but you can look back at it and go, "Oh, this is where I was in my head at that point," and realize how it affected you and how it changed you.
Well, yeah, and I think that's you nailed that right there, right? Having this ability to identify not how we felt at that moment, but really what we learned from that lesson, and what benefit did that experience bring to us. Right. So like even Marcus was talking about, he took 2 or 3 year break because of his, high social.
Yeah. His priorities
life,
changed.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu wasn't a priority.
Jiu-jitsu wasn't priority, and drinking was, and girls were, and partying, and whatever the case was. And it was fun. But then he also said that even though a lot of guys got much better than him during that time when he was off, if he continued, likelihood of him actually doing jiu-jitsu for a living as he does right now and having a black belt maybe would not happen. So that's the interesting part behind life in general, I think, is that there's this cliche saying, things happen for a reason, and a lot of people don't believe in this, but like there is something to it, because the decision that we've made in the past, good or bad, brought us to the point that we are today. If any of those decisions, millions of them in the past, if one of them was different, the path could have changed.
Sure.
We would not be here, right? Just think about it. If you didn't get off the couch the one day and made those 2 calls or whatever, or reached out about the academy, we would not be sitting here.
Right.
It's not that, like, I believe it's not that I will be sitting with somebody else. We would not be sitting here. This would never take place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Man, I would be so lucky.
Do you want the names? Right. Do you want the names of those 2 people?
Keep them accountable for dropping them in my life, dropping you in my life.
They've both been here. They've both been in the building here.
Give them a shout out. I know who they are. So.
Yeah, it's Pete the Greek, and he doesn't even know really that it was him, and Jeff Seraphin. So they both had students that I was close with. Yeah. And I called those guys up, and I was like, dude, I gotta, I'm out in the suburbs. I don't know anybody out here. Yeah. Things gotta change. And I always wanted to try this stuff.
By the way, Jeff is doing good. I just did a seminar at his academy.
Jeff's awesome.
Yeah,
Jeff's always doing good.
Yeah. He's a phenomenal guy.
And I'm sure wherever he is in the world, Pete's doing well too. Wherever he's at right now.
Yeah, I think Pete is doing seminar at Armand's now in next month.
In California?
Yeah, in California. Yeah.
Nice.
So if you're in California, what was it?
Armin's got a new Gracie affiliate there, and Armin Fati, and they're doing great things, man.
Risk Like the World is coming to California.
Yeah.
Anyhow, all right. Well, let's close this chapter.
Yeah,
and
please.
let's please. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Later, man.
All right. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Raw Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.